The plane was about to take off from John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. James Carter, a 25-year-old young man, was settling into his seat next to the window, hoping to relax during the flight to Los Angeles. He looked through the small oval window, observing the frantic movement of the airport staff. The runway lights blinked rhythmically, almost hypnotically. James was traveling for business, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something unexpected was about to happen. As the passengers continued to board, James began to observe the people around him. There was an elderly couple arguing about which movie to watch during the flight, a young man with headphones immersed in his music, and a mother trying to control her small children who were excitedly running down the aisle. However, it was one particular sight that caught his attention and wouldn't let him look away. A young black girl around 10 years old, with big, sad eyes, sitting next to an older man. The man, who appeared to be in his 50s, had a nervous and restless appearance. He was constantly looking around, as if he feared being watched. The girl, on the other hand, seemed withdrawn, almost curled up in her seat, and her eyes showed a silent plea for help. James couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. As the plane taxied to the runway, James tried to focus on his book, but the image of the girl and the man wouldn't leave his mind. He observed more closely, trying to catch any sign that would confirm his suspicions. It was then that he noticed the girl, Emily, making subtle hand signals, almost imperceptible, as if she were trying to communicate without being noticed by the man next to her. James frowned and looked away toward the aisle, trying to think of a way to act without causing a commotion. He knew he couldn't just ignore what he was seeing. He took a deep breath and decided to take action. He called over a flight attendant who was passing by, a woman with blonde hair tied in an impeccable bun and a professional smile. "Excuse me," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Can I talk to you for a moment? It's something important." The flight attendant stopped and leaned slightly to hear better. "Of course, sir. How can I help you?" James quickly glanced in the direction of Emily and the man next to her. "I'm worried about that girl over there," he said, lowering his voice. "She's making signals that seem like a cry for help, and the man next to her is acting very strange." The flight attendant followed James's gaze and observed the pair for a few seconds. She seemed skeptical at first, but the seriousness in James's eyes made her reconsider. "I'll check on that," she said, before walking away to speak with the head flight attendant. While waiting, James felt his heart beating faster. He knew he might be getting involved in something dangerous, but he couldn't shake the image of Emily's sad eyes from his mind. The flight attendant returned with the head flight attendant, who seemed more experienced and had a concerned expression. "Sir, my name is Karen," said the head flight attendant. "I understand you have a suspicion about that girl and the man next to her. Can you tell me exactly what you saw?" James repeated his observation, explaining Emily's subtle signals and the man's nervous behavior. Karen nodded and thanked him before moving away to observe the pair more closely. She walked down the aisle, pretending to adjust some items, while keeping a close eye on Emily and the man. After a few minutes, Karen returned to James. "Mr. Carter, thank you for alerting us. We'll monitor the situation closely and take necessary action if we confirm your suspicions." James nodded, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. He knew the situation was far from resolved, but at least he had taken the first step. As the plane gained altitude and New York City faded behind them, James continued to discreetly observe, hoping his intervention could make a difference. During the flight, Karen and the flight attendant took turns observing Emily and Richard Thompson, the man next to her. Each time they passed down the aisle, they looked for more signs that could confirm James's suspicion. Richard's behavior remained strange. He seemed distrustful and avoided eye contact with any crew member. Emily, for her part, remained quiet, occasionally casting furtive glances at James, as if she knew he was her only ally on board. At one point, when most passengers were distracted by movies or napping, Karen approached James again. "We're keeping an eye on the situation, Mr. Carter. We'll inform the pilot and, if necessary, contact the authorities in Los Angeles." James thanked her, feeling the tension ease a bit. He knew the crew was doing their best within the limitations of a commercial flight. However, he remained worried about what might happen when the plane landed. What if the man tried to escape with Emily? What if there were other accomplices waiting at the airport? As these questions swirled in his mind, James had an idea. He took out his phone and discreetly began typing a message to the Los Angeles police. He detailed his suspicions, described the appearance of Emily and Richard, and asked for a team to be ready to intercept the flight as soon as it landed. He knew the message would be sent automatically once the plane was within range of a cell tower. Time seemed to drag as the plane crossed the country. James looked out the window, watching the landscapes change below, but his mind was focused on the situation on board. He tried to imagine what else he could do to help Emily, but he knew that at that moment, the best thing to do was to trust the crew and the authorities. When the plane began descending toward Los Angeles, the tension in the air was palpable. Karen approached James one last time before landing. "The pilot is already in contact with the police," she informed him. "We'll do everything possible to ensure everyone's safety on board." James nodded, grateful. He knew the landing would be the most critical moment. As the plane touched down and began to slow, he watched closely for any suspicious movement from Richard. The man seemed even more nervous now, as if he sensed something was wrong. Finally, the plane stopped at the gate, and passengers began to get up and retrieve their luggage. James remained in his seat, watching. Suddenly, he saw Richard try to stand up quickly, pulling Emily by the arm. Before he could make any move, the flight attendant blocked the way. "Sir, please wait until all the passengers in front of you have disembarked," she said firmly. Richard hesitated, but eventually backed down, realizing he had no other option. Meanwhile, James noticed police officers approaching the plane through the window. He felt a momentary relief, knowing help was on the way. When the police finally entered the plane, the tension reached its peak. Richard tried to stand up again, but he was quickly restrained by two officers. "Sir, we need you to come with us," one of the officers said, as they handcuffed Richard. Emily was gently escorted by a female officer who wrapped her in a protective embrace. James watched everything, feeling a mix of relief and accomplishment. He knew his intervention had made a difference, but he also knew this was just the first step in a long journey for Emily. As the police escorted Richard off the plane, he finally relaxed in his seat, allowing himself to take a deep breath for the first time in hours. Once the plane was emptied, James was approached by one of the police officers. "Mr. Carter, we'd like to thank you for your alert. Your quick action may have saved this girl's life." James simply nodded, feeling humble in the face of the situation. "I just did what anyone should do," he said with a tired smile. As he followed the police to give his statement, he couldn't help but think about what would come next. He knew Emily's and Richard's story was far from over, and that dark secrets would still be revealed. But for now, he could be content knowing he had made a difference on that flight of suspicion. While Richard was taken into custody, Emily was escorted to a safe room at the airport. There, she was received by FBI agents who began to interrogate her with care and sensitivity, aware of the trauma the girl had suffered. James, invited to accompany Emily's statement, was impressed by the calm and professionalism of the agents. "Emily, we know you've been through something very difficult," said Special Agent Sarah Mitchell, a woman with a determined appearance but a gentle look. "We're here to help you and make sure nothing bad happens to you again. Can you tell us what happened?" Emily, still visibly shaken, began to speak slowly. "I was kidnapped 2 years ago," she said, her voice trembling. "Richard took me from a park near my home. He said he would hurt me if I tried to run away or scream for help." James felt a lump in his throat as he heard Emily's words. He couldn't imagine the terror the girl had lived through all this time. Sarah, keeping calm, asked additional questions, trying to gather as much information as possible about Richard and anyone else involved. "Emily, do you know if Richard was working with anyone else?" Sarah asked, leaning slightly forward. "Any detail you can remember can help us find other children who might be in danger." Emily paused, seeming to think deeply. "He was always talking on the phone with someone," she finally said. "I don't know the name, but he seemed to be taking orders from someone else. And there were other children too. I heard him talking about them." Sarah exchanged a significant look with James. Emily's revelation indicated that Richard was part of a larger child trafficking network. The urgency of the case increased, and it was clear that they needed to act quickly to dismantle this organization and rescue other victims. "Emily, you were very brave to tell us all this," said Sarah, placing a comforting hand on the girl's shoulder. "We promise to do everything we can to find those other children and ensure the responsible parties are brought to justice." James, still processing everything that was happening, was approached by another FBI agent. "Mr. Carter, we'd like to hear your full statement about what happened on the flight," said the agent. "Your help was crucial, and any additional detail could be important for our investigation." While James prepared to give his statement, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of responsibility and determination. He knew this was just the first step in a long and complex process, but he was willing to do whatever it took to help Emily and other children who might still be in danger. James's statement was detailed and precise. He described every moment of the flight, from when he noticed Richard's strange behavior to Emily's subtle signals for help. The FBI agents listened attentively, asking additional questions to clarify details. "Did you notice anything about Richard's conversations with Emily? Anything that might give us a clue about his accomplices?" Sarah asked. James closed his eyes for a moment, trying to remember every detail. He was always whispering to her, but once I heard him mention a place called Oasis. I don't know if it means anything, but it seemed important. Sarah noted the information, exchanging another significant look with her colleagues. "Any clue is valuable, Mr. Carter. We'll follow up on this lead," she said, thanking James again for his help. With his statement concluded, James was invited to wait while the FBI agents continued to interrogate Emily and analyze the information collected. He found a seat in the waiting room, feeling exhausted but also relieved to have helped in some way. He looked at the clock and realized that only a few hours had passed since it all began, though it felt like an eternity. A short time later, Sarah approached James, a tired but grateful smile on her face. "Mr. Carter, your help has been invaluable so far. We'll continue working on this case, and any additional information you remember can be crucial. Don't hesitate to contact us." James nodded, feeling an unexpected connection with the agent. "I'll do that, Agent Mitchell. I want to help in any way I can. This situation has opened my eyes to something I never imagined possible." Sarah smiled, impressed by James's determination. "We greatly appreciate it, Mr. Carter. And don't worry, we'll do everything possible to ensure Emily and other children like her are protected." That night, in her FBI office, Sarah reviewed the information obtained from Emily and James. The girl's words about a boss and the constant movement of children indicated a well-structured and dangerous organization. She knew she was dealing with something big and complex. "Thomas," she called her partner, who was analyzing photos and documents at the next desk. "We need to find out more about Richard Thompson. He's just a piece of this puzzle. We have to track all his contacts and find out who's behind this." Thomas agreed, already typing on the computer to access the FBI databases. "I'll start tracking his calls and correspondence. If there's a larger network, we'll find it." In the following days, the investigation progressed rapidly. The agents discovered that Richard Thompson had connections with several suspicious figures, all of them with criminal backgrounds involving human trafficking. Among the names, one stood out: Paul Johnson, a respected businessman and Emily's uncle. Sarah couldn't believe the coincidence. "This can't be just a coincidence," she murmured to herself. "We need to investigate Paul Johnson thoroughly." The confirmation came when one of the FBI informants reported that Paul Johnson was involved in suspicious activities and frequently contacted known criminals. The situation was becoming increasingly urgent. Sarah knew they needed to act quickly to prevent more children from being harmed. She called an emergency meeting with her team and included James Carter, who who was now considered a voluntary consultant due to his crucial involvement in the case. "We have a hot lead," she announced. "Paul Johnson is connected to this trafficking network. We need concrete evidence to arrest him and dismantle the entire organization." James, standing beside Sarah, felt a chill. "Emily will be devastated to learn her uncle is involved," he commented. "But we need to do this for her and all the other children." Sarah nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Let's draw up a plan. We need surveillance, search warrants, and a well-coordinated operation to capture everyone involved." The operation was meticulously prepared. The FBI team tracked Paul Johnson's movements, monitoring his communications and investigating his properties. Every detail was analyzed with precision, with Sarah leading every step of the plan. Finally, the day of the operation arrived. Sarah, Thomas, and James were in a surveillance vehicle, watching Paul Johnson's mansion from a distance. "Remember, we need to capture him alive," Sarah instructed the team over the radio. "He's the key to dismantling the entire network." The tension was palpable as the agents positioned themselves around the mansion. When Sarah gave the signal, the team sprang into action, storming the property with precision and speed. Paul Johnson was caught by surprise, with no time to react. "FBI, hands up," Sarah shouted, pointing her gun at Paul, who stood in the middle of the luxuriously decorated living room. Paul raised his hands slowly, a cold and calculating smile on his face. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he said with disdain. "We know exactly," Sarah responded, handcuffing him, "and we'll make sure you never hurt another child again." As Paul was led away by the agents, Sarah and James began searching the mansion for evidence. Documents, computers, and communication devices were seized, each representing a vital piece of the puzzle. James found a photo album in one of the rooms. As he flipped through it, he saw images of Emily and other children, all looking happy and carefree before being kidnapped. He felt a lump in his throat as he imagined the suffering each of them had endured. "Sarah, I think you'll want to see this," he called, handing the album to her. Sarah flipped through the pages, her face hardening with each image. "This is more than enough to indict him," she said, closing the album decisively. The operation was a success, and Paul Johnson was taken into custody, where he would face serious charges. The mansion was sealed off as a crime scene, and the investigation continued with the analysis of all the evidence collected. Later, Sarah and James informed Emily of her uncle's arrest. The girl was in shock, tears streaming down her face. "He was my uncle," she whispered. "How could he do this to me?" James hugged her, trying to comfort her. "I know it's hard, Emily, but you're very brave. Thanks to you, many other children will be saved." Sarah also approached, placing a comforting hand on Emily's shoulder. "We'll make sure he pays for everything he did, and we'll be here for you every step of the way." The revelation of Paul Johnson as the leader of the trafficking network was a shock to everyone, but it was also a significant victory in the fight against organized crime. The investigation would continue, with Sarah and her team determined to dismantle the entire network and bring justice to all the victims. Meanwhile, James became a key figure in the investigation, his courage and determination inspiring everyone around him. He knew the journey was far from over, but he was committed to moving forward, alongside Sarah and all those fighting for a safer future for children. And so, the story of Emily, James, and the tireless pursuit of justice continued, with new challenges and twists still to come. After the dark revelations that emerged from Emily's interrogation, the FBI went into action with renewed determination. Sarah Mitchell, with the experience and precision of a special agent who had dealt with complex situations before, led the operation. James Carter, who had been driven by courage and empathy on the flight, now found himself deeply involved in the hunt to dismantle the child trafficking network. The joint operation of the FBI with other law enforcement agencies quickly bore fruit. Using the information provided by Emily, Sarah and her team managed to track the movements of various members of the criminal organization. These operations resulted in a series of arrests in different locations, from modest apartments to rural properties. Each arrest brought new information and, crucially, led to the release of more kidnapped children. James, who initially had no connection to law enforcement, became an increasingly valuable asset to the team. His intuition and ability to notice details that escaped many proved invaluable. Sarah, recognizing these skills, began to include him more actively in the operations, and an unlikely friendship began to blossom between the two. "You really have a knack for this, James," said Sarah during a coffee break on one of the many planning nights. "Ever thought about becoming an agent?" James smiled, shaking his head. "Never crossed my mind until now. But if I can help stop more children from going through what Emily did, I'm in." This partnership was put to the test when an informant, willing to make a deal to reduce his own sentence, provided a crucial lead. According to him, the leader of the network was hiding in an isolated mansion on the outskirts of the city, a place that was both a refuge and a fortress. Sarah and James, accompanied by an FBI tactical team, set off for the mansion in the middle of the night. The atmosphere was tense, each team member aware of the danger they might face. As they approached the property, Sarah laid out the final plan. "We're going in quietly," she instructed. "We need to catch everyone by surprise. Our goal is to capture the leader and rescue any children who might be here. James, you stay with me. I need your eyes and instincts." James nodded, feeling the adrenaline pumping through his veins. They moved through the dense vegetation surrounding the mansion, each step calculated to avoid making noise. James's heart pounded as he observed the imposing mansion ahead, its dark and silent windows like vigilant eyes. With a signal, Sarah indicated for the team to split up. Some agents moved to the sides of the mansion, while others positioned themselves at the main entrance. Sarah and James led the group that would go through the backyard, where a secondary door offered a less guarded entry. As they approached the door, Sarah motioned for everyone to stop. She crouched down, examining the lock carefully. "It's electronic," she murmured, "but I think I can open it." Skillfully, she manipulated the lock, and within minutes, the door opened with an almost inaudible click. They entered silently, their weapons ready. The mansion's interior was luxurious, but also had a chill that made James's skin crawl. Something was deeply wrong in that place. They advanced through the corridors, encountering minimal resistance. Most of the guards were neutralized quickly and quietly. Sarah and James kept to the front, moving toward the mansion's heart. It was then that they heard a sound that made them stop. Muffled voices coming from a basement. Sarah signaled for the team to proceed with caution. They descended a narrow staircase and found a heavy door. Sarah turned the knob slowly and opened the door, revealing a scene that filled them with horror and determination. The basement was full of children, all visibly frightened and some in poor health. "We're here to help," Sarah said firmly, trying to convey calm to the children. "You're safe now." James, with tears in his eyes, helped lead the children out of the basement. Each of them represented a victory, but also a reminder of the atrocities that still needed to be fought. With the children safe, the team moved toward what seemed to be the mansion's main office. Upon entering, they found a man sitting behind a desk, looking at them with a cold and calculating smile. "I wondered how long it would take for you to get here," he said in a calm and controlled voice. Sarah raised her gun, pointing directly at him. "You're under arrest. It's over." The man raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, but the look in his eyes said he didn't consider himself defeated. "We'll see," he responded enigmatically. As the agents handcuffed the man, Sarah and James shared a look of relief mixed with the determination that there was still much to be done. The mansion operation was a success, but they knew the trafficking network was vast and complex. Back at the FBI base, the process of interrogation and analysis of the evidence began immediately. The information obtained at the mansion revealed more about the organization's structure, its operations, and the individuals involved. Each detail became a vital piece of the puzzle that Sarah and her team were trying to solve. James, now an official volunteer consultant, dedicated more and more time to the case. His friendship with Sarah grew stronger every day, both driven by the desire for justice and the need to protect the innocent. They spent nights reviewing documents, tracing connections, and planning the next steps. The following weeks were intense, with continuous operations resulting in more arrests and rescues. The FBI team worked tirelessly, driven by the success at the mansion and Sarah's inspiring leadership. James, now more confident in his role, became a pillar of support not only for Sarah but for the entire team. The determination to dismantle the entire trafficking network kept them going, each step bringing them closer to justice for the victims. Emily, now in a safe environment, began to heal from her trauma with the help of professionals and the support of her new friends. The story of Emily, James, Sarah, and the relentless pursuit of justice continued, with new challenges and twists still ahead. Their bond grew stronger with each victory, knowing that together they could make a difference and create a safer future for many children. This marked the beginning of a new chapter where courage, friendship, and unwavering commitment to justice would guide them through the darkness toward a brighter, more hopeful future. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and watch this next story that is very exciting.